Good evening, hello and welcome to this edition of the India Development Debate. I'm Nantara Rai. India's 10-year struggle at the world stage finally over, and it's been a victory. The United Nations Security Council has put the dreaded terrorist and Jaish-e-Mohammed founder Masood Azhar in the global terrorist list, with China supporting India's demand. This tag means Azhar will face the travel ban and assets freeze as well as an arms embargo. This diplomatic achievement of the Narendra Modi government comes a little after the midpoint of Battle 2019, the Lok Sabha elections, and after the government's renewed efforts post-Uri, Pathankot, Pulwama terror attack. In a move to thwart the BJP's aggressive campaigning along the line of national security, the Congress claims the process has started under the UPA, and their tenure saw 6 surgical strikes as well. How big a victory is this for India's fight against terrorism? Is this a mark of success of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's foreign policy? Is the Congress claiming undue credit? And has the Congress fallen into the BJP's trap by talking about national security, the main election plank of the Bharatiya Janata Party this election season? All that and more in this edition of the India Development Debate. Before I invite my panelists, let's get to the reactions that have been pouring in through the day.
जब देश जीतता है तो हर भारतवासी जीतता है, लेकिन विपक्ष के कुछ मित्रों को लगता है कि अगर इस जीत में वो शामिल हो गए तो शायद इसकी राजनीतिक कीमत उनको देनी पड़े.
We would want to highlight the fact that the zero tolerance policy for terror by the Prime Minister has borne fruit, and this is definitely something which this government will want to draw the attention of the people of India. Terrorism shall not be tolerated, and this clear declaration from the UN is something which is noteworthy.
जब यूनाइटेड नेशंस सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल ने पाकिस्तान में स्थित और वहां से समर्थित आतंकवादी संगठन जैश-ए-मोहम्मद के सरगना मसूद अजहर को ग्लोबल टेररिस्ट घोषित कर दिया है, आज भारत को यह एक बहुत बड़ी कामयाबी मिली है.
I'm happy that this has materialized.
कर दिया तो अच्छा है. ये इससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा समय बताएगा. तो ये तो बहुत दिनों से होना था. अब देखिए ये बहुत पहले हो जाना चाहिए था. चुनाव के समय ये हो रहा है. अब ये क्या चुनावी बात है क्या है मैं नहीं जानता.
We are happy that other countries have prevailed upon Beijing, upon China, to withdraw their objection. This resolution was moved by European countries, and India is grateful to them.
प्रधानमंत्री पाकिस्तान के वो दोस्ती जता रहे हैं मोदी जी के साथ, तो दाऊद इब्राहिम, हाफिज सईद और मसूद अजहर को तत्काल भारत को सौंप देना चाहिए.
As you can see, a lot of reactions that have been pouring in. Let me now invite my panelists and introduce you to them. Gopal Krishna Agarwal, the National Spokesperson for the Bharatiya Janata Party. Sanjay Jha, the National Spokesperson for the Congress Party. Funchok Stopdan, the former ambassador to the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. And Bharat Karnad, the research professor in the National Security Studies, the Center for Policy Research. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on ET Now. Ambassador Subdan, I'm going to come to you first. What did you make of what is going on today? But I would rather focus with you on, for getting him tagged as a global terrorist, a lot of diplomacy would have been needed on the India front. Is it only Narendra Modi's way? Is it a win for his foreign policy? The US has also claimed victory. How are you reading all of this?
Is it for me? Hello.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. This is the election time, so people will talk about politics, but I don't want to get into this. What I could understand from what Ambassador Akbaruddin said in New York yesterday, is that this is a hard work done by Indian diplomats for last 1 decade, over 1 decade. So I think it's a collective effort by everyone, those who are in the government, those who are in the bureaucracy, everywhere. I think they have put in a lot of effort to come to this stage. Well, I think the government of the day will make some political score, but I don't know that aspect. But surely you can't stop them either. But on the whole, it's a very good thing. I won't say it's a victory because we were not playing a cricket match with somebody. It's a big achievement for Indian diplomacy, and this is where it lies, and there we should stop also. We should not make too much politics out of this. And secondly, Masood Azhar is a very small, cock in the wheel. Why do you have to focus so much on Masood Azhar to put entire India-China relationship at Masood Azhar thing? And if you want to be those specific in our relationship with China with one fellow, then tomorrow China will also come back on one specific issue. I think we should leave it a little more open, broad. This is where I see the risk in future. They also might demand something, and it will be very difficult for us to, something happens on the border. How do you now link up Masood Azhar with border? So therefore, there's always a risk in overplaying all these issues. Obviously, and I heard Prime Minister Modi's statement very carefully. He didn't say anything against China. He thanked everybody, and he said congratulated the whole nation. But blaming somebody or the other, I think that doesn't require at this moment. We should feel very happy that we have reached to some level where I think we are quite confident now on terrorism issue. We have certainly put the Pakistanis on the back foot, and they have no other option. And the China also realized, I suppose, by end of the day, they had no other option. Right. But to agree to, and interestingly thing, it was not so much United States, it's the French proposal.
Right, Ambassador, you made some very valid points. Let me take it across. Ambassador, you made some very valid points. I would like to now discuss that with Bharat Karnad. You have Ambassador Stopdan saying that, don't overplay this. This is not a victory. Yes, it's important, and also we should not overplay it perhaps because this was more symbolic in nature. Jaish-e-Mohammed was already blacklisted, but with this, it is a significant step, which is what we're talking about, Bharat Karnad over here. What I would now like to talk to you about is that the future of the Indo-China relationships in post what has happened at the UN. Would you say that this is a win for Narendra Modi's policy, whether it was Doklam, now that he has managed to convince China as far as the United Nations for Masood Azhar also goes, and the Indo-US bonhomie, which we talk a lot about these days?
Well, let me just be the Cassandra in all these very optimistic talk and so on. The fact of the matter is that the Americans and the Chinese have given up very little in return for in trying to please India. And what India has sought is a very small thing, really, in return. The American senior officials, I heard them say that now that we have cornered Masood Azhar for you, we'll expect much more give on in other areas like trade and security, etc. Similarly, I'm sure Beijing has had its own quid pro quo for supporting, or rather withdrawing, its technical hold that it has had on declaring Masood Azhar a global terrorist. So there might be a price to pay, a diplomatic price to pay, because that's the trade-off. All diplomacy is, is a series of trade-offs. So what have we actually given to the Chinese or to the Americans in return for their trying to please us on this very small issue? And I say this is a very small issue because, is it anybody's belief that now that this guy has been declared a global terrorist, Pakistan government has come in formally to say, yeah, we're going to ban him too, that the ISI is going to give up on an asset that they have nursed over the years, and that has helped them a huge lot in the past. So I think we tend to get elated by small victories, small successes, without seeing, rather contemplating the price we may have to pay and the costs that are going to be imposed on us, and the fact that nothing has changed on the ground. Pakistan Army's ISI will still support and launch the JeM cadre in another name across into the valley for terrorist activity. So I think it's a bit premature for everybody here to jump up and down and claim a great victory.
Bharatiya, I'm going to interrupt you there because it's only a 30-minute long. It's only a 30-minute long debate. I want to bring in the politicians now. Both of you have now set the stage to bring the politicians in. Gopal Agarwal, yes, it's a big symbolic achievement, but you've just heard what the two gentlemen before you, Ambassador Stopdan as well as Bharat Karnad, has said. Will you now have to pay a big price? Will India have to pay a big price for getting the US to rally behind it, as well as China to rally behind it? You just heard what Bharat Karnad had to say. How real is that fear? Donald Trump talks about, for example, India's import duties when it comes to Harley-Davidsons. Do you now can you even ask for an exemption when it comes to, for example, importing Iranian oil?
Nayantara, the issue is that we were already paying a big price with regard to the terrorism. It was the main issue was isolation of Pakistan and acknowledging that Pakistan is an epicenter of terrorism, and the Pakistan had to be isolated globally. We knew that the Pakistan was initiating all this cross-border terrorism. We knew that it was inflicting us. We were paying heavy price of all this activity, but globally it was not being properly acknowledged. I do not say that this is an isolated achievement and only we should look into it. We should look also on the Uri strike, surgical strike, then the Balakot air strike, and then when the Prime Minister said that if there is a one bullet from across the border, we will not leave that, we will give befitting reply, our army is free to take action. Even we have taken steps inside the Kashmir. So, here the terrorism was being conducted from cross border. We have hit across the border. Army has been more straightforward in coming out with counter insurgencies. Then globally also India has been acknowledged, and it is a diplomatic effort on all sides. Even economically we are growing. So, cumulatively everything has to be seen in that light. You cannot say we should not, if it is a small step, anybody, Mr. Bharat says it is a small step, that does not mean that we should not take or we should not be happy with that step. So, this is a cumulatively together, all these things now show that India has much more support across the globe. Its thought on the terrorism is being accepted, acknowledged. It may have been accepted many places, but it is openly being acknowledged. That's an important message.
Sanjay Jha for that. Sanjay Jha, how's the Josh? After Masood Azhar being blacklisted as a global terrorist, the Congress party suddenly coming out more than halfway through elections talking about the UPA also did so many surgical strikes. Why is the NDA talking about it? I want to ask you, why didn't your party talk about it earlier? Why are you only talking about it after Masood Azhar has been tagged as a global terrorist? Do you not look like spoiled sports today?
Nayantara, you should read Dr. Manmohan Singh's interview today. That is how a statesman with complete political responsibility speaks. He mentioned that for us, a national security, a surgical strike, 6 of them that happened under the UPA was like a strategic deterrence. So the attempt was never to make political capital out of it. Now, you asked me this question, please don't blame the Congress party. Some of India's most eminent air chiefs, army chiefs, and our naval chiefs have said the same thing in a letter to the President of India, no less, saying, please stop politicians from trying to milk military endeavors. And I think this is something that the BJP needs to hear loud and clear. Now, let me answer your question on Masood Azhar. I think both the gentlemen who spoke earlier on the panel, I think made very pertinent points. Now, number one, let me tell you this, Masood Azhar was released by the BJP government. Number two, Masood Azhar's Jaish-e-Mohammed was banned by the Pakistan government establishment, and yet you know that after Pulwama, Jaish-e-Mohammed claimed full public responsibility, got international media spotlight for saying that they committed the ghastly act of terrorism. What does it tell you? That these bans have no meaning if the Pakistan deep state is supporting one of its own homegrown terrorist outfits. Point number two, we banned Hafiz Saeed within weeks of 26/11. Now look at the reality. America, which has given Pakistan approximately an aid of $35 billion over the last, since 2001, has a $10 million bounty on Hafiz Saeed's Lashkar-e-Toiba.
Yeah.
Hafiz Saeed actually created a political party and is fighting an election. So you can see in broad daylight that if the ISI and the Pakistan army cared two hoots for United States of America, which is the biggest influence on Pakistan, you think they actually cared for any of these, putting, Masood Azhar on a global terrorist list? It has no impact. The end of
Sanjay, we're running out of time. You made some valid points. So let me go across to Ambassador Stopdan. 1 minute, Sanjay. I'm going to come back to your final comments. Let me go across to Ambassador Stopdan. Ironically, we're talking about Masood Azhar and the, the tagging of him as a global terrorist on the 8th anniversary of Osama bin Laden's death in Pakistan when he was killed by the US forces. Bharat Karnad raised this point, Ambassador Stopdan, so I want to ask you, is this really going to have an impact on terrorism? How big an impact is it going to have? Considering Osama bin Laden was executed on Pakistani soil, you've got Masood Azhar now being tagged as a global terrorist. Okay, Pakistan is also banning him. But what's going to be the impact of this across the border for India, you think?
I don't think that's why people are describing this situation as a symbolic win for India, but that doesn't mean that terrorism is going to end tomorrow with Masood Azhar. There will be hundreds of other Masood Azhar will appear from a deep Pakistani state. I don't know, whatever they want to bring out from that country. The point here is that this is a moral victory. We should leave it there. And beyond that, to stretch it to the international level, well, that would be very vague, I think, for us to champion the cause of human rights in terrorism terms and other things. It's a larger philosophical issue. But I believe the states are looking for concrete actions. And here, I think this government has done it. Credit must be given. But the point here is that this is a byproduct of the, we are caught into the US-China crossfire now. Sometimes the issues are not important. The timings are very important. Look at the timing today in the international situation. From today onwards, the sanction, the waiver that we got, China and India, that is going to be over from tomorrow. And I think China needs us. They are looking for a perfect time, and they got this time at the midst of Indian election, at the time where the sanctions are going to be imposed again. And therefore, it's a perfect situation. And don't forget, in what happened in Sri Lanka 10 days ago, the series of bombings, that is the real route for the Belt and Road for the Chinese. And they understood there were 5 to 6 or maybe 10 Chinese got killed in Colombo. They understand all these things. So there is a compulsion. There is certainly a compulsion for the Chinese. But in March itself, they could have given us this support at the UNSC. But they didn't do it because they are looking for the perfect time. And I think the signal coming is that today The trade war between United States and China is
I'm running
too
out of time.
serious.
So Bharat Karnad, I'm going to come to you. There's a lot, Bharat Karnad, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. You made some points which I want to now go across to Bharat Karnad for. The Ministry of External Affairs has said that Pulwama played a key role in listing of Jaish-e-Mohammed Chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist by the United Nations. There's a lot that is also being talked about the dossier, whether Pakistan's name was in it or not in it. There's also this entire story, I don't know if you've read it in the Economic Times, about how China said, let's first wait for the general elections in India to end before we come out with our view, which didn't happen, and that's why maybe the US prevailed. What do you make of all of this?
Now look, the US and China, they're right now engaged in their high-level trade talks to hammer out a deal, a trade deal, a bilateral arrangement, and that's their priority area. This is a very minor issue, virtually a tertiary issue for both the Chinese and the United States. They don't really care much whether India suffers from terrorism or not, as long as they don't. And they, of course, act unilaterally when they have to contain terrorists within their fold, or when they execute or prosecute anti-terrorist actions, and they do so without let or hindrance. Now, Pulwama, among other earlier surgical strikes, etc., was again a sort of this is retaliation, of course, and that's helpful, but we have had a record of pussyfooting around the kind of options we actually have. We have never really quite gone ahead and worked punitively against Pakistan to make Pakistan hurt in their support for terrorism. But that's their state policy of asymmetric warfare. So
yes, because even when Hafiz Saeed was banned,
I doubt very much.
Because, Bharat Karnal is a very valid point. And, Sanjay Jha, coming to you, you talked about how the Congress had succeeded in being able to ban Hafiz Saeed. What happened after that? We saw how Hafiz Saeed was living in Pakistan. So what you're claiming to be a victory is exactly what the BJP is doing today. But Sanjay Jha, what I want to get at is, you brought up Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's interview. After that, we've seen a Congress press conference, Rajiv Shukla giving out the dates of certain surgical strikes. What I found to be very ironical was in the data that was shared by Rajiv Shukla, at least, it doesn't seem that we saw a surgical strike after 26/11. I'm not saying that was a decision your government took, but aren't you giving ammunition to the BJP to come up on that point? Just like how you're suddenly talking about national security, have you fallen into the trap of the BJP? It's its main election poll, and that's now suddenly what the Congress has no choice but to talk about.
Nayantara, listen, when you're in politics, and you're facing 24/7 media scrutiny, you don't make every statement merely to, kind of shape a political narrative. You also have a responsibility to share appropriate information with the public of India. You don't want them to be misled by some kind of a, slanted propaganda. I'll give you one example. I live here in Mumbai, and Narendra Modi, when the 26/11 attacks were still on, and he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, was giving a press conference outside the Oberoi Hotel, blaming the government. Now, you want to talk of politicization? I think that probably was the most brazen manifestation of it. But let's come to the Masood Azhar issue. What has the Congress said? The Congress has said, listen, if you really look at even the UN resolution, it does not mention Pulwama. It does not mention Kashmir. And those have been the principal targets that I think clearly was on Masood's agenda. So what are you talking about? It is actually a dilution that in a great number of ways makes India look fairly compromised. I think it's an embarrassing gaffe. I mean, is that the trade-off to have him branded as a terrorist, to allow Narendra Modi to start making, a political speech within 1 hour of the announcement? I saw it yesterday. I was on a TV show, and the moment this news came, Modi started making all kinds of sarcastic observations on previous governments. I want to tell you this, whichever party is in power, in the past, in the future, I can tell you with full responsibility, will never compromise on India's national security. Which is why I feel it's hugely regrettable that the BJP is actually mocking the leaders of the past.
Correct.
And when Arun Jaitley says invisible surgical strikes, he's insulting the army of India. He's insulting the entire defense services of India.
Gopal Krishna Agarwal, how do you react to those charges that are being made? Though Sanjay Jha, I did notice that you've not talked about national security as a poll plank, which the Congress suddenly has no choice but to talk about in election season. We're running out of time. Final comment from you, Gopal Krishna Agarwal. Why are you politicizing this so much?
It is not politicizing. If you are discussing national security and your actions and army's actions or the diplomatic actions, you have to discuss. How do you discuss national security if you do not discuss what is the ground level actions? So, this is the point. This is not politicizing, this is discussion. Second thing I want to say is, when Mr. Jha says that it is a strategic deterrent that we did, but that deterrent, if it is not effective, what is it deterring to? Third thing is, when they are saying that we did the surgical strike at this point of time, if they are bringing out, then it is a political motive.
Sir,
that
will you
they are
apologize
talking.
for Pulwama?
Fourth is, the defense ministry has RTI. No, wait, the fourth thing is that the defense
will
ministry
apologize for
army
Gadchiroli?
Has in the RTI reply said no surgical strike took place. The fifth point I want to make is that nobody outside is going to fight our terrorism fight. It is for us, our countrymen, those
General
who have
Bikram
to fight
Singh
that
has said that.
battle against
Is
whatever
the BJP
forces.
challenging
And
General
the sixth
Bikram
point I
Is
want
the
to tell,
BJP challenging
Mr.
General
Jha,
Bikram Singh?
I did not interrupt with
Is the
within
BJP
you.
challenging
You should
General
keep your
Bikram
bloody
Singh's
mouth
credibility
shut.
here?
You should not speak in between. The thing is, the sixth point I want to tell you is,
let's not bicker. My producer you could call it divine intervention by my producer. She's saying we're running out of time and I have no choice but to end this debate. But Gopal Agarwal, I think you made all of your points, as did Sanjay Jha. If I had more time, I would have liked to talk more about terrorism and, of course, the ugly form of Maoism that, was resurrected yesterday in Maharashtra. You can't just talk about terrorism, which is cross-border. We need to make Indians feel safe within our borders. With the new resurgence of Maoism as well. That'll be a different debate, but I'd like to thank all four of you for joining us here on ET Now. Many thanks for watching. That's the first leg of the India Development Debate.